Flight attendant strikes black woman. Unaware she is the billionaire owner of the plane. The flight attendant's voice elevated, ensuring it reached the ears of all passengers on board. Please relocate to the rear of the aircraft at this time, or I will have to involve security. Thank you for your cooperation. Her words had a cutting quality, and her tone was laced with condescension. Naomi, composed and serene, gazed up at her. I've already told you, I'm not moving, she stated plainly. Her tone was steady, nearly calming, yet it carried an unmistakable power. She faced humiliation before the crowd. Yet no one anticipated the turn of events that followed when the woman they believed to be powerless rose to her feet and unveiled her true identity. As we explore this narrative, if you hold the conviction that every individual deserves respect regardless of their background, we invite you to click the subscribe button now and share your location with us. The aircraft shone brilliantly in the afternoon sunlight, its elegant design hinting at an opulent experience for those on board. Within the cabin, an atmosphere of luxury prevailed, featuring sumptuous leather seating, gilded details, and an aura of exclusivity that enveloped all occupants in a sense of regal grandeur. Travelers glide effortlessly, their luxurious luggage trailing behind as they are guided toward the elegant private jet poised on the tarmac. Before long, they found their places, with some engrossed in their devices while others enjoyed champagne served by the diligent flight crew. Within the cabin, soft ambient music gently fills the air. Among them was Celeste Morgan, a poised and serene woman in her late 30s. Naomi, clad in a tailored navy blazer paired with matching slacks, radiated an air of understated elegance. She navigated her surroundings with a serene assurance, choosing not to seek the spotlight. Celeste Morgan enters the cabin, her serene demeanor captivating those around her. With deliberate steps, she scans the cabin momentarily before making her way to her seat. Her destination was not merely another trip, it represented a journey to oversee her expanding empire. Although none of the passengers on board were yet aware of her identity, she favored it that way, at least for the time being. Sandra Blake, the lead flight attendant, stands poised at the entrance, her impeccably tailored uniform accentuating her sharp features that radiate authority. She acknowledges each passenger individually, her smile radiating warmth for some while appearing more reserved for others. She takes great pride in maintaining order on the plane, although her interpretation of order frequently hinges on individuals' appearances or behaviors. Sandra Blake's inviting demeanor transforms slightly as she offers Naomi a brief welcome aboard. The warmth distinctly lacking. Seated behind Naomi were Mr. and Margaret Thompson. The couple in their 60s radiate the confidence of experienced travelers. Margaret Thompson holds a petite knitting bag, her fingers eagerly poised to start her craft. Richard Thompson holds a folded newspaper, his face reflecting a sense of mild curiosity as he observes the surroundings. Sandra Blake's smile radiates warmth for them. Good morning, Mr. and Margaret Thompson. It's a pleasure to welcome you back. Naomi casts a quick look over her shoulder, observing the striking difference in Sandra Blake's tone. Her expression remains composed, while her eyes reveal an understanding of the unspoken dynamics at play. As the other passengers get comfortable, Sandra Blake navigates the cabin, making certain that everything is properly arranged. She greets the Raymond couple with a warm smile. Is there anything you would like me to assist you with before we depart? Margaret Thompson gently shakes her head, fully engrossed in her knitting. Richard Thompson gives a subtle nod toward his coffee, signaling his satisfaction. As Sandra Blake walks by Naomi, her demeanor transforms once more. She casts a quick look at Naomi's bag, positioned neatly beneath the seat, and her lips form a tight line. She fails to extend the same courtesy or warmth, merely passing by in silence. Have you ever found yourself in a scenario where an individual's demeanor changed in response to outward appearances? We invite you to share your thoughts in the comments section below and encourage you to click the subscribe button. Sandra Blake Reed, in her early 40s, exuded an air of precision that suggested a deep-seated affinity for control. Her immaculate uniform and flawlessly styled hair complemented her keen demeanor. For Sandra Blake, appearances held paramount importance, and her assessments were both rapid and unyielding. Sandra Blake's gaze sharpened as she observed Naomi getting comfortable. There was something about Naomi that felt off to her. It was neither her attire nor her composed demeanor that stood out. Nor was it the absence of a desperate need for attention, a trait often displayed by the passengers Sandra Blake considered deserving of admiration. In Sandra Blake's perspective, Naomi was undeniably out of place. With swift, deliberate steps, she made her way toward Naomi, a tight smile forming on her lips. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said, her tone courteous yet laced with a hint of condescension. "It appears that you may have navigated to the incorrect section." Naomi looked up at her, her demeanor composed. "I believe this is my seat," she replied, her voice unwavering. Sandra Blake maintained her smile, yet her tone took on a sharper edge. "I have my doubts about that. This area is designated exclusively for our distinguished passengers." In close proximity, the other passengers started to observe the interaction. A Tiffany Green, leaning slightly to gain a better perspective. Her interest heightened. A courteous Derek Miles seated across the aisle cast a glance in Sandra Blake's direction, his expression tinged with mild disapproval at her tone. Naomi maintained her composure, her gaze unwavering as she responded, "You may want to verify your passenger list before drawing any conclusions." Sandra Blake raised her eyebrows, her annoyance evident just beneath the surface. "I don't need to check anything," she stated firmly. "I have a clear understanding of who is meant to be here and who is not." The atmosphere in the cabin grew increasingly tense. The passengers shared furtive glances, engaging in hushed whispers amongst themselves. Some individuals, feeling uneasy, chose to feign ignorance. A passenger quietly remarked, "Why doesn't she simply relocate if she's in the incorrect seat?" Another person shrugged, "She is likely attempting to gain access to a complimentary upgrade." Sandra Blake stood firm, her arms crossed defiantly. "If you don't move to the back of the plane," she stated, her voice projecting for others to hear, "I'll have to call security." Naomi inclined her head ever so slightly, her serene demeanor remaining steadfast. "Contact anyone you require," she stated. "However, I am not relocating." The inquisitive socialite let out a soft gasp. The Derek Miles leaned in, his brow deeply furrowed. Sandra Blake, her frustration evident, directed her gaze toward the junior flight attendant, Lena Kim, who stood nearby, observing with a hint of anxiety. "Lena Kim," Sandra Blake commanded, "please escort her to the back." At this moment, Lena Kim paused, her gaze shifting between Naomi and Sandra Blake. She felt the urge to voice her thoughts, to mention the idea of reviewing the passenger list as Naomi had proposed. But Sandra Blake's piercing stare held her in silence. With a hint of hesitation, she nodded and moved ahead. Naomi adjusted her position in her seat, maintaining her composed demeanor. "You might want to think carefully about what you're doing," she said softly, her words imbued with a significance that Sandra Blake had yet to fully grasp. Sandra Blake dismissed the warning with a scoff, brushing it aside. "I know precisely what I'm doing," she stated. "At this moment, please rise." How would you respond if you were treated in this manner during a flight? We invite you to share your insights in the comments section. If you are enjoying this narrative, be sure to like and subscribe for more captivating stories like this one. Sandra Blake's tone became more incisive as she pointed toward the rear of the plane. "You shouldn't be here," she reiterated, her voice now laced with impatience. The passengers observed in astonished silence, the atmosphere charged with tension akin to static electricity. Naomi reclined slightly, her eyes fixed intently on Sandra Blake. "It's important not to make assumptions about others," she said softly. Sandra Blake's smirk grew more pronounced. "It is inappropriate to occupy seats for which you have not purchased a ticket." The suspense heightened as Naomi finally reached for her phone, her serene demeanor remaining intact. She swiftly typed a few words before placing the device back on the armrest. "You're making a mistake," she stated plainly, her words lingering in the atmosphere. Sandra Blake chose not to listen. "We'll see about that," she murmured, once more signaling for Lena Kim to take action. The junior attendant approached with caution, her uncertainty evident as the situation progressed. Sandra Blake's irritation intensified as Naomi sat calmly, her quiet confidence highlighting Sandra Blake's mounting frustration. The atmosphere in the cabin grew increasingly charged with each fleeting moment, captivating the attention of nearby passengers who observed the interaction with a mix of intrigue and astonishment. Sandra Blake's voice elevated, ensuring that all present could hear her clearly. "Please relocate to the back of the plane at your earliest convenience." or I will be compelled to contact security. Thank you for your cooperation." Her words had a biting quality, and her tone was laden with condescension. Naomi, composed as always, gazed up at Sandra Blake. "I've already informed you. I'm not moving," she stated plainly. Her tone was steady, nearly calming, yet it carried an unmistakable strength that only served to aggravate Sandra Blake even more. A woman in front, a Tiffany green with impeccably styled hair and an aura of privilege, leaned in toward her companion. She whispered with sufficient volume for those around her to catch her words. "It appears she is attempting to gain access without paying." Sandra Blake capitalized on the remark, her smirk reappearing. "That is precisely how it appears," she remarked, crossing her arms and glancing at the other passengers as if seeking their endorsement. "Rules serve a purpose. There are individuals who fail to show them the respect they deserve." Naomi remained unperturbed by the insults and the escalating whispers surrounding her. She maintained her steady gaze on Sandra Blake, her composure radiating a quiet defiance that resonated more powerfully than any spoken words. Lena Kim paused for a moment, then moved forward to examine the passenger list secured near the cockpit door. Her fingers quivered as she perused the names, yearning to discover something that could assist Naomi. Before she had the chance to speak, Sandra Blake reacted sharply. "Lena Kim, may I ask what you are currently engaged in?" Lena Kim lowered her voice to a near whisper. "I was simply verifying. I've got this under control," Sandra Blake interjected, her tone cutting through the conversation. "It is unnecessary for you to engage in this matter." Lena Kim took a step back, her cheeks reddening with embarrassment. She bit her lip, caught in a conflict between her sense of integrity and the anxiety of jeopardizing her employment. As the tension escalated, a kindly gentleman positioned across the aisle leaned in closer. The Derek Miles, clad in a sharp suit and radiating a composed presence, offered a smile to Naomi. "Pardon me," he said softly. "Is everything okay?" Naomi glanced at him, her demeanor becoming gentler. "I am doing well, thank you," she responded, her voice calm yet appreciative of the thoughtful gesture. Before the Derek Miles could elaborate, Sandra Blake interrupted, her tone laced with accusation. "Sir, I would be grateful if you could refrain from promoting the disruption." She pivoted to face Naomi, extending a finger in her direction. "Your behavior is drawing attention." The Derek Miles scowled. "From my vantage point," he stated with composure, "it appears that you are the one creating this scene." Sandra Blake's expression darkened with fury as she redirected her focus to Naomi. "I've had enough of this," she snapped. "You can either choose to relocate, or I will ensure that you are escorted off this aircraft." Naomi held her gaze steadily, unwavering. "You can give it a try," she said gently. Sandra Blake's frustration reached a breaking point. Her voice trembled as she leaned in closer to Naomi. "It would be appreciated if you could acknowledge that you are in the incorrect seat, as this would help streamline the situation for everyone involved." Naomi chose to remain silent, her composed demeanor only intensifying Sandra Blake's frustration. With a huff of frustration, Sandra Blake finally abandoned Naomi and redirected her focus to her other responsibilities. Sandra Blake strode purposefully down the aisle, the sound of her polished shoes softly echoing against the carpet. She balanced a tray of sparkling water, her demeanor composed and professional, yet her expression revealed a hint of irritation. Naomi sat in her seat, absorbed in the book she held in her hands. Passengers engaged in quiet conversation, creating a serene atmosphere, until Sandra Blake's underlying hostility started to emerge. Naomi waited patiently for her drink, observing as Sandra Blake attended to Mr. and Margaret Thompson first before serving the others in the back. Sandra Blake, on the other hand, did not make any attempt to recognize Naomi. As the tray lay nearly empty, Naomi finally broke the silence, her voice soft and soothing. "Could I kindly request some water, please?" Sandra Blake halted her movements, casting a dismissive glance at Naomi. She replied tersely, continuing on her way without offering any further explanation. Naomi's serene gaze tracked Sandra Blake's departing silhouette, yet she chose to remain silent. If you observed this type of behavior, how would you respond? Would you take action or remain silent? We invite you to share your thoughts in the comments section below. As the minutes ticked by, Naomi adjusted her posture in an attempt to discover a more comfortable position. She subtly extended one leg into the aisle. Her movements understated. Sandra Blake re-entered the room, tray in hand, her keen gaze noticing the subtle change. Rather than requesting Naomi to shift her leg, Sandra Blake intentionally altered her course. In a swift motion, Sandra Blake's foot made contact with Naomi's leg. The tray tipped, causing the glasses of water to cascade forward, splattering onto Naomi's lap and the floor beneath her. Sandra Blake inhaled sharply, her voice piercing and resonant. Be mindful of where you place your legs. Your actions have resulted in a significant disruption. The sudden commotion caused passengers to turn their heads in surprise. Naomi glanced upward, momentarily taken aback yet maintaining her composure. As she brushed the water from her trousers, she spoke with a sense of calm. Yet you inadvertently collided with my leg. Naomi inclined her head ever so slightly, her serene gaze steadfast and unwavering. All I seek is to be treated with the same respect afforded to everyone else. She responded, if that is too much to ask, perhaps it is you who does not belong here. The words lingered in the atmosphere, delivering a subtle yet potent admonition. Sandra Blake's expression turned crimson with fury. She moved in closer, her frustration reaching a boiling point. Do you believe it's appropriate to address me in that manner? She hissed, her voice cutting through the air. In a startling turn of events, Sandra Blake, unable to restrain her emotions, lifted her hand and struck Naomi across the face. The sound reverberated through the cabin, piercing and startling, reminiscent of a thunderclap. Gasps echoed among the passengers. The Derek Miles paused midway, his expression a blend of disbelief and anger. Lena Kim's hands instinctively covered her mouth, her eyes widening in shock. Even the inquisitive socialite seemed caught off guard, her earlier smirk giving way to an expression of discomfort. Naomi gradually straightened, her hand resting composedly on her lap. Her expression was calm and collected, her gaze unwavering as she met Sandra Blake's eyes. The cabin was enveloped in silence, with tension hanging thick in the air. Naomi adjusted her posture in her seat, though her expression remained unchanged. The depth in her eyes conveyed a heaviness that caused Sandra Blake to pause for the first time. Naomi spoke softly, her tone steady yet piercing. You just made the worst mistake of your life. If you found yourself in Naomi's position, what actions would you take? We invite you to share your thoughts in the comments section below. If this story has captured your interest, be sure to hit like and subscribe now. Naomi gazed at Sandra Blake, her voice calm and assured. She expressed her thoughts with a measured tone, stating, I have been patient with you, but your behavior has crossed the line. Sandra Blake's expression shifted to one of intensity. Her jaw set firmly, and her hands balled into fists at her sides. Have you crossed the line? She exclaimed, her voice elevating in intensity. You have been the source of disruption since boarding this plane. Naomi remained composed, showing no signs of reaction or engagement. She gradually straightened her posture, her eyes locked intently on Sandra Blake. She maintained her composure, undeterred by the overt hostility surrounding her. You'll regret that, Naomi said softly, her voice imbued with a quiet authority that resonated throughout the entire cabin. Sandra Blake hesitated briefly, her self-assurance rattled by Naomi's steadfast demeanor. However, she swiftly regained her composure, letting out a loud scoff. Do you feel remorse about it? She cast a disdainful glance. What actions will you take? Should we contact the authorities? Naomi remained silent. There was no necessity for her to do so. Her silence conveyed a profound message, and the passengers sensed a palpable shift in authority. From the corner of the cabin, Lena Kim, the junior flight attendant, observed the scene unfold with a blend of dread and resolve. Throughout the day, she had been silently monitoring Sandra Blake's actions, her unease intensifying with each fleeting moment. At that moment, she realized that remaining silent was no longer an option. With a sense of subtlety, Lena Kim distanced herself from the chaos and retrieved her phone. With a swift motion, she dialed the number, her fingers quivering ever so slightly. Upon connection, her voice emerged soft yet resolute. It's Lena Kim, she stated. A situation has arisen on the plane. Lena Kim resumed her position, her expression reflecting both concern and resolve. Sandra Blake stood with her arms crossed, her anger simmering beneath the surface. Yet her authority appeared to be diminishing. Naomi sat composed, her tranquil presence sharply opposing Sandra Blake's fury. The passengers remained captivated, their gazes shifting between Naomi and Sandra Blake, uncertain of the unfolding events. One of them inclined toward Naomi, her voice scarcely rising above a whisper. "Are you feeling all right?" she inquired, her concern sincere. Naomi glanced at her, presenting a gentle, comforting smile. "I'm fine," she replied gently. The atmosphere in the cabin was thick with tension, the stillness interrupted solely by the soft hum of the aircraft's engines. The situation was evidently far from resolved. Naomi sat poised, her posture unwavering even as water trickled onto her attire. She regarded Sandra Blake, her tone steady yet resolute. "All that was required was for you to show me respect. Yet you fell short due to your prejudiced beliefs that I do not belong here. Simply because of your own feelings." Sandra Blake's irritation intensified, her grip on the tray firming as she leaned in closer, her tone dripping with mockery. "Esteem? Perhaps earning it first would be more appropriate. Individuals like you have yet to demonstrate that they merit my respect." The atmosphere in the cabin was thick with tension, as passengers exchanged furtive glances, some adjusting their positions in their seats, uncertain of how to respond. The unvoiced inquiry hung in the atmosphere. To what extent would this unfold? At this moment, Naomi's anger intensified. "You shouldn't have said that," Naomi remarked, her tone both incisive and resolute. Her words held a profound significance, leaving everyone in the cabin in suspense about what would unfold next. Sandra Blake crossed her arms, her frustration palpable. She scoffed. "Oh please, I've been more than patient with you. Perhaps now you'll grasp that actions have consequences." Naomi's eyes narrowed slightly, yet her composed demeanor remained intact. "You're right," she said softly, her words measured. "Actions do have consequences, and you're about to discover just how true that is." For a brief moment, Sandra Blake hesitated, an unsettling quality in Naomi's tone sent a shiver down her spine. Yet she swiftly dismissed the sensation. With a dismissive wave of her hand, she remarked, "I'm not intimidated by your hollow threats. You will be the one to experience regret, not I." Sandra Blake averted her gaze, projecting an air of confidence. Yet beneath the surface, a sense of unease began to take hold. She had crossed a boundary, and although she wouldn't acknowledge it, she was aware of the truth. The gazes of the passengers, the look of horror etched on Lena Kim's face, and Naomi's serene demeanor all combined to create an overwhelming sensation for Sandra Blake. As if the very walls were constricting around her, she attempted to dismiss it, yet her mind was in a frenzy. What if this woman is not who I believe her to be? Naomi's demeanor and her calm, authoritative speech stood in stark contrast to Sandra Blake's expectations. For the first time, a hint of uncertainty penetrated her fury. Sandra Blake's discomfort intensified as she revisited the moment in her thoughts. What prevented her from yelling or fighting back? What prompted her to suggest that I would come to regret it? Her stomach churned as the realization dawned upon her. Her prejudice and anger had taken control, and now she sensed trouble on the horizon. Sandra Blake surveyed the cabin, seeking a semblance of support. Yet it was evident that the passengers had turned against her. The Derek Miles fixed her with a piercing gaze, his arms crossed in a posture of silent disapproval. The inquisitive socialite leaned in closer to her companion, her head shaking in disapproval. Lena Kim appeared as though she wished to vanish, her hands shaking as she grasped the passenger list tightly. Naomi, on the other hand, sat quietly, her demeanor composed yet enigmatic. She crossed her legs with deliberate Lena Kim, leaning back in her seat, exuding a quiet confidence that intensified Sandra Blake's sense of unease. Naomi maintained her composure without needing to elevate her voice. There was no need for her to behave in such a manner. Her silence conveyed all the truths that Sandra Blake was reluctant to confront. The atmosphere in the cabin grew increasingly charged as Sandra Blake endeavored to assert control over the unfolding situation. Despite her efforts, an unsettling awareness lingered that her choices would inevitably come back to haunt her. Naomi's words resonated in her thoughts. "You are making an error." Unbeknownst to Sandra Blake, Naomi had already dispatched a message, and her subdued reaction to the slap was not one of submission, rather. It was a calculated strategy. Unbeknownst to her, trouble was on the horizon, and Sandra Blake was about to discover the magnitude of her misstep. What are your thoughts on Naomi's next steps? We invite you to share your thoughts in the comments section. Her frustration reached a boiling point. Naomi sat quietly, exuding an air of calm and composure, seemingly unaffected by the unfolding situation. However, beneath the surface, Sandra Blake sensed the heavy burden of her actions weighing down on her. Without uttering a single word, Naomi instinctively reached for her phone. She moved with intention, typing swiftly before placing the device on the armrest next to her. The gesture appeared straightforward, yet it held an implicit strength that caused Sandra Blake to cast a wary glance at the phone. "What are you currently engaged in?" Sandra Blake inquired, her tone incisive. Naomi took a moment before responding. Instead, she reclined slightly, her composed demeanor steadfast. "You'll find out soon enough," she said softly, her words laden with a weight that intensified Sandra Blake's unease. If you believe Sandra Blake's reaction was unwarranted, please give that like button a click. Be sure to subscribe for more captivating stories like this one. The cabin descended into a tense quietude, interrupted solely by the subtle drone of the aircraft's engines. Passengers shared furtive glances, engaging in hushed conversations amongst themselves. The inquisitive socialite inclined closer to her companion, her voice a mere whisper. "What is happening? Do you believe she holds significant importance?" The Derek Miles seated across the aisle remained composed, an insightful expression gracing his features. He drummed his fingers on the armrest, his eyes locked on Naomi, as if he had uncovered a truth that eluded everyone else. Shortly thereafter, the distinct sound of footsteps echoed from the front of the cabin. The cockpit door swung open, revealing the Captain Davis, whose face was ashen and expression taut. He surveyed the room momentarily before approaching Sandra Blake with swift and purposeful strides. Sandra Blake glanced at him, her annoyance unmistakable. "What is happening?" she inquired, her tone incisive. The Captain Davis halted before her, his stance rigid. "You need to step aside," he said, his voice resolute yet tinged with unease. Sandra Blake furrowed her brow, clearly perplexed. "Excuse me?" she remarked, crossing her arms. "What is the reason for me to step aside? I am managing this matter." The Captain Davis's eyes darted towards Naomi before returning to Sandra Blake. "I just received a call from management informing me that the owner of the plane is on board. She is Ms. Williams," as indicated by Naomi. His words resonated in the room with the force of a thunderclap. The cabin filled with gasps and murmurs. The inquisitive socialite took a sharp breath, her eyes growing wide as she glanced between Naomi and Sandra Blake. "She owns the plane," she whispered, her voice laced with disbelief. The Derek Miles acknowledged with a knowing nod, his demeanor composed. "Less than text," he muttered under his breath, a sense of confirmation washing over him, as if the revelation had validated his long-held suspicions. Lena Kim, positioned near the galley, became motionless. A wave of relief spread across her face as the realization dawned on her. Naomi was not merely another passenger, she possessed a strength that surpassed the understanding of those around her. Meanwhile, Sandra Blake fixed her gaze on the Captain Davis, her complexion shifting to a concerning hue of red. "That simply cannot be accurate," she faltered, her voice losing its characteristic clarity. "It appears there may be an error." The atmosphere aboard the plane was charged, with the only sound piercing the stillness being the steady hum of the engines. Passengers cast anxious looks at one another, the recent memory of the slap lingering vividly in their thoughts. Sandra Blake positioned herself by the aisle, arms crossed, her defiance unmistakable even as the discomfort in the atmosphere intensified. Naomi sat quietly, exuding calmness and composure, her posture impeccably poised. Suddenly, the captain's voice resonated through the intercom. "Attention, everyone, we will be making an unexpected landing shortly. We kindly ask that you remain seated as we prepare for our descent." Passengers whispered among themselves, their expressions reflecting a shared sense of bewilderment. The Derek Miles inclined his head toward Naomi, murmuring, "What's happening? What is the reason for our landing?" Naomi remained silent, her demeanor calm yet enigmatic. Sandra Blake's brow knitted in concern, her confidence wavering as she cast a hesitant glance toward the front of the cabin. The aircraft landed Lena Kimfully, and shortly thereafter, a polished black SUV arrived at the tarmac. The doors swung open, revealing two impeccably dressed assistants who emerged with brisk and purposeful movements. They climbed the steps of the plane with a composed confidence, their presence capturing attention the instant they entered the cabin. "Miss Williams," one of them said warmly, their voice filled with respect. "Everything is ready for your review." Gasps echoed throughout the cabin. Sandra Blake stood still, her complexion paling as the weight of the realization washed over her. "Miss Williams," she stammered, her voice scarcely rising above a whisper. The assistants paid her no mind, directing their full attention toward Naomi. "Is there anything you require before we move forward?" one of them inquired, their tone respectful. Naomi rose slowly, her movements exhibiting a Lena Kimful and intentional quality. She straightened her blazer, exuding an aura of confidence and authority. The passengers observed in astonished silence as Naomi finally addressed them, her voice firm and authoritative. "I'm Celeste Morgan," she began, her eyes scanning the cabin with a measured intensity. "I am the proprietor of this aircraft, as well as the founder of this airline." Sandra Blake's lips parted and closed, yet no words emerged. The once self-assured and somewhat arrogant flight attendant now appeared as a mere shadow of her former self, her earlier confidence giving way to overwhelming panic. Naomi focused on Sandra Blake, her voice steady yet cutting like a knife. "Sandra Blake, your behavior today has been utterly Lena Kimful," she stated, her words slicing through the silence. "Your actions have resulted in personal embarrassment, mistreatment of a passenger, and a negative impact on the airline's reputation." Sandra Blake faltered, her voice quivering. I was unaware." Naomi raised a hand, bringing silence to the conversation. "You were unaware because you chose not to extend the respect that every passenger rightfully deserves," she stated with conviction. "Rather than approaching the matter with an open mind, you chose to make assumptions, acted with bias, and exacerbated a situation that could have been resolved with fundamental understanding."